Today's episode of the Inside EVs podcast is brought to you by E-Range EV Tyre. E-Range EV tyres are specifically engineered for electric vehicles. Using an advanced manufacturing process called liquid phase mixing, E-Range EV's EcoPoint 3 technology creates a tyre with lower rolling resistance and longer range, while offering low levels of wear and high grip. All this while staying affordable. Go to erangetires.com. That's ERANGE tires.com to find your EV's next set of tyres.
Hello, and welcome to the Inside EVs podcast for November the 11th, 2022. This is episode number 136. Today's episode is brought to you by E-Range EV Tires. And on today's show, we'll be talking about the debut of the Volvo EX90, the reveal of the updated Audi Q8 E-Tron. We drive the BMW i7 and Autocharge Plus at EVgo stations, which simplifies the fast charging experience. I'm Dominic Yoni, Inside EV's forum moderator and Inside EV's editor. Joining us today is the unwavering Tom Malogny, Inside EV's editor and host of the YouTube channel State of Charge. We also have international man of mystery, Mr. Martin Lee from the EV News Daily podcast, which is available on all the best podcast platforms. And Kyle Connor joins us from the majestic, practically palatial halls of Out of Spec Studios, where he produces high voltage videos for a growing number of YouTube channels. And finally, we have a special guest with us for a little while, at least this week. Please welcome Jonathan Levy, Chief Commercial Officer of EVgo Fast Charge. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Good morning,
guys.
Thanks, Dominic.
All right. So let's kick this thing off with our guest, Jonathan, and talk about Autocharge Plus. So we tried to have Jonathan on last week, but we ran into some technical difficulties. We thought we could sort them out, as we were making the evolution from backstage, but it didn't happen, actually, if you watched that show. So we're back again here this week, and we'll do it right. He was a guest on an episode of our infrastructure series back in February. So go ahead and look that up if you like to get a good overview of EVgo and its strategy for world domination. And we'll have a link in the description on our YouTube there. And so, okay. So EVgo launched Autocharge Plus a little over a month ago, and it's available at all EVgo stations now. Previously, I understand it was only available to EVgo fleet customers. So if you have a compatible car, you just need to plug in, and to begin a charging session, no need to swipe a credit card, tap an EVgo RFID card, or open an app. Most EVs on sale now in the US that fast charge with a CCS connector are compatible. So Jonathan, this sounds a lot like Plug and Charge, which is something EVgo announced earlier this year is available at your stations for drivers of General Motors products. So maybe start by telling us, what is Autocharge Plus exactly, and how it relates to Plug and Charge.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic, and gentlemen. It's great to be back with you this time with a better internet connection. I won't shame and name the hotel I was at, but needless to say, better to be at my home office than on the road to try and talk to you all. As you mentioned, we had announced that we had this functionality ready to go with GM a couple months ago, and then what we did about a month or so ago is make sure that we could finish the testing, and it worked with the rest of the CCS-capable vehicles that were enabled with this type of communication. But what we've heard from customers loud and clear is that what they want is a seamless charging experience. And so it really, frankly, doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is, for a customer, if you have the ability to plug in and charge, that's the most important thing. So the one clarification to make is that a couple of years ago, we had Autocharge available for our fleets. And now what we did is we call it Autocharge Plus now, because we've enhanced it with additional features, mainly around security and safety, so that if you plug in, you make sure that you get a notification on the app just in case, right? Whether that just in case is because you sold your car and forgot to unenroll, or because Dominic lent his car to Tom and doesn't want to pay for Tom's charging. He has the ability to unenroll and re-enroll. And the concept is very simple, because you can basically, it takes the one enrollment, right? You add your VIN, it confirms that your vehicle is capable of engaging with Autocharge Plus, and then it makes you plug in one time to authenticate in the app that you're trying to confirm enrollment. And then every time after that, it's plug in and you can walk away and go. It makes it even easier than before to fast charge, which is what we know everybody is looking for. So we're really excited about it. And this morning, we announced an additional promotional package for Tesla drivers, because Tesla drivers that have a CCS connector and a CCS adapter, and the vehicles that are capable of using that CCS adapter, they can enroll in Autocharge Plus. And so to make sure that they're aware of that, we're promoting a special 3-month free trial of our EVgo Plus pricing, which includes free reservations and discounted rates for their charging sessions. And we're excited because we want to make sure that everybody, from the commenter that's already noted that he or she is using their Ioniq 5 with Autocharge Plus, to the Tesla drivers and everyone in between that's capable.
So, Jonathan, Dom, let me cut him for a quick question, because I think this is the first question we have to ask. Why do we need Autocharge Plus? We have plug-in charge. What, like, is this, CHAdeMO was out there and then CCS came and just to create confusion, and some cars will have Autocharge and some cars will have plug-in charge and some stations will be Autocharge. And so you won't know which station you could go to and just seamlessly plug into. It'll depend on what network, what area. It seems like we are over complicating this. Explain to us why this is the right path to go.
Yeah. So Tom, it's not an either or in our perspective on this one, right? And Autocharge Plus is about the functionality and making sure that we can deliver it in a simple way. That simplicity is the goal. 15.11.8 is still on the roadmap. To get a little bit nerdy, there's that difference between 15.11.8-1 and 15.11.8-2, and some other networks and car companies that implemented one standard before it was finalized, and it's not backwards compatible. And so some of those vehicles are going to need to be upgraded with firmware. And so basically, with all that going on, we said, we're going to keep working on this as an industry, because there are still some challenges on the root certificate authority, the multiple root certificates, multiple certificate validation, who will be accepting certain validation. And we said, that's an important thing to work out as an industry. We're part of those technical conversations. It's on the roadmap. But while those things are being sorted out, we don't want to leave customers in a position where in a couple of years, they're not sure if their car can use that version or not. So we pushed Autocharge Plus out so that right now, customers can have that experience across the vehicles that are capable of this level of communication. We've tried to make it clear, and we'll continue to promote which vehicles are eligible to enroll. And in fact, that's part of why we're doing this through a VIN authentication, so that the app can tell you, yes, you're requesting to enroll, and the EVgo app will say, yes, it's available. That's great. Let's go do this. And then as we continue to develop as an industry the standards for 15.11.8, we can do that. I think oftentimes 15.11.8 has become this synonymous, interchangeable part with plug and charge, but there's more to 15.11.8 than one part of that standard, and it is complicated. And most EV drivers don't really care what's happening at the International Standards Organization debates. We have to. So what we said is, let's get something out there today. We'd learned some success with it the first time we rolled it out with our friends at GM Maven when they were doing that fleet deployment. We've seen it be very valuable for our fleet partners. And now we want to make sure that everybody whose car is capable of can also take advantage of the benefits.
Right. So one quick follow-up. So does that mean that, like, moving forward, your EVgo's plan is going to be to offer both? So, plug-in charge and Autocharge. I mean, for instance, like Volkswagen products can't use Autocharge. So because they don't have a static MAC address. So, I mean, is it your plan to have both all the time, or are you just going to see how this plays out and maybe you'll only, use Autocharge moving forward?
Yeah, look, as I said, 15.11.8 is on our roadmap, and it's one of those things where in this industry, you never want to say you'll never do anything. I think it's so dynamic that we want to see where things are going. For us, it really was about the fact that there is a lot more complexity involved in 15.11.8 implementation than is sometimes discussed in the public sphere. And so we didn't want to wait for all that complexity to get resolved. We said, let's go with this. And we think it's a great technology. We've improved it significantly with some great innovations, including, for example, impossible travel, right? If Kyle plugs in and then 15 minutes later, there's the vehicle that looks like it's Kyle's plugs in at a higher state of charge than it was 15 minutes earlier, we know that that's not right. Something's wrong. We'll block that session, notify Kyle, see if he wants to unenroll, make sure there's something going on. So security features like that are a big part of what we wanted to do here. But this industry moves so quickly, as you know better than anyone. I see Kyle nodding a bit when I talk about 15.11.8. And so I would imagine that you all appreciate that this will be a dynamic situation. Our technical team is hard at work at continuing to make sure that we are at the forefront of what those innovations are. I don't know if I've talked about it with you all before, but we did launch an EVgo Innovation Lab in El Segundo to do more testing, not just on the chargers and our ecosystem, but also vehicle to charger interoperability testing, so that when new vehicles come out, we're making sure there's a proper handshake, not with just the chargers we have in the field, but the chargers that we're testing for future deployment as well.
Nice. So I guess so Volkswagen products like Porsche and Audi, Volkswagen Group, I guess I should say, products don't work with plug-in charge, not plug-in charge, but Auto Charge Plus right now. Are there any other auto brands that don't work with it?
Well, the Nissan Leaf won't, because it needs to be CCS.
Right.
There are a handful of others where we're still having some discussions with them about, what their plan is with the identifiers. So, for example, right now BMW is not on the list of vehicles that will work, but all the GM products, whether that's Cadillac or Chevy, the Ford Mach-E and the F-150 Lightning, the Genesis, Kia, and Hyundai vehicles, Polestar, Subaru, Toyota, Tesla, Volvo. That's going to cover a lot of the gamut here. And
yeah, that's pretty good chunks. Yeah,
exactly. We want to make sure that those drivers are aware that this can be simple. You can enroll one time and basically plug in at any EVgo charger and have an easy peasy experience.
Antonio Samuel says in the comments, this is a game changer. I have this on my Polestar too, and my wife and parents can use my car and not have to worry about charging. So I think that's a great, peace of mind thing for people who aren't like technology oriented, to go up to a charging station and try to work their way through that process that they're not familiar with. It's not like we all grew up as kids pumping gas in cars, with our families, and it's kind of simple and mechanical kind of thing. But so this is a little different. And this kind of makes it smoother, actually, than I think the gas experience.
My concern,
there's no payment. Yeah.
My concern, Antonio, is that your in-laws or your parents plug into Jonathan's EVgo station and it works flawlessly, and then 2 days later they're near an Electrify America station, so they plug in and it's not working. So they don't understand why, because they expect that same experience everywhere they go. And that's my concern about having different standards on different networks or whatever. And I'm not here to tell Jonathan it was a bad decision. I'm just trying to understand, how this is going to play out for the customer moving forward.
It reminds me of when I had a company car years ago, and we had a Shell business card, and I could only put petrol in at Shell stations. Because I knew that in advance, I just made sure that I didn't run on empty, and then I was passing a BP station and then had to pay for it personally. So we had a Shell charge card, and I was topped up with that. It sort of seems a little bit like that to me, that if you use EVgo, you use Autocharge Plus, you know that you're using that network. But that is a step further, as Tom, you say, than just simply plugging anywhere and walking away, which is the Tesla experience, because that's the most seamless way of charging an EV.
Well, and look, two things, right? One, if everybody used EVgo stations, I wouldn't really have a problem with that. But secondly, Simon had asked a question in the chat that is directly relevant to this, right? Which is, why not just use credit cards? Well, and the answer is yes, and. Right? We have credit card readers as well. We want to make sure that, and some of that's required by our friends in California, but also something where it's about that convenience. And so if you have a car that can use Autocharge, that's always going to be more convenient for you at EVgo. If you are enrolled in that and then it doesn't work at a competitor station, use a credit card there. But part of the why here is to make it simpler and easier, including the fact that credit card readers do have challenges, right? There are communications challenges, the equipment themselves. We're all integrating third-party credit card readers into the stations that we're deploying. And that sometimes means that there are some challenges, both with authentication, initiation, and the communication with the bank. We can get super nerdy into this, but essentially in young industries, when the denominator of transactions is smaller, there are more challenges. And so sometimes a customer can get a transaction rejected through swiping a credit card. Whereas if we have their credit card on file with the account, there's already an established transaction there. And so having the integration with the app, whether it's Autocharge Plus or just in the app, can make that process easier. And we're seeing a much higher success rate of first charge initiations with Autocharge Plus than we are from any other method of initiating a charge. So in addition to making it easier, it's making it better. And that's part of what the goal is for EVgo generally. How do we give customers the best experience we can, knowing that it's a young industry and we're all overcoming challenges together?
Hey, Kyle, you have some Autocharge Plus questions, I'm sure.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's important to say like this works with Tesla. But I remember a few months ago we were chatting about Tesla to or CCS to Tesla adapters, and this was a lot of question about whether or not charge point operators would be open to Teslas coming in with their adapters. There were some sketchy ones on the market at the time. Jonathan, now that there's I guess, official 500 amp capable Tesla CCS adapter, what's the Tesla experience for people rolling up? I have not set up Autocharge on my car yet, but I plan to do it. I plan to shoot a video on it. I think it'll be really fun. But what's that like? Walk me through how that works.
Yeah, before you even said you were planning to shoot a video, I was going to say I'm looking forward to the Kyle video on using Autocharge Plus on a Tesla and all sorts of other vehicles, since you're out there you all are out there on the road testing all the things and getting to play with the great new models. And so, yeah, that's exactly right. It works with Teslas. That's partially why we announced this morning a new promotional plan where Tesla drivers with a CCS CCS adapter eligible vehicle can enroll in a special 3-month promotion to get EVgo Plus pricing without paying a monthly fee and get free reservations. But you made it clear, right? The 500 amp side of this is the easy part of it. So if you go to one of our higher power stations, which is the new default for EVgo is 350 kW power sharing configurations out there, you will be able to get that maximum speed that you are expecting depending on your state of charge, as you all know. And is appropriate to brand Tom's show. But it's going to be exactly like you expect. And in fact, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what you get as far as how long the sustained maximum rate of charge is there when you're out there.
Yeah, I was talking to your colleague, Jeremy, who handles a lot of your technical stuff about a lot of this. And he and I were working together on some Lucid Air charging. He was checking the back end for me, making sure that the car was getting everything it asked for. But I think that just comes to a different conversation, which maybe we can diverge off Autocharge for a second, which is the actual stations that EVgo is putting in. We've seen a huge partnership with EVgo and Delta installing their big boy chargers, but also their 100 kilowatt or 150 kilowatt city chargers. That seems like a really good idea. How is that partnership with Delta going? What's going on with the SK Signet chargers that are starting to go in as well? What types of stations can we expect to see from EVgo moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. It's a great question because it's all tied back to the same issue of giving the customers a great experience. And so you mentioned two of our biggest partners, and I think it's worth reminding people that EVgo, we don't manufacture chargers. We consider ourselves a technology specifier. And by working with a number of manufacturers, it gives us the ability to have Jeremy and the technical colleagues say, hey, here's what we need for our customers to have a great experience. Who can meet this spec? Make sure it's safe, reliable, and has a lower total cost of ownership over the life of operating that equipment. And we go through a constant process of engaging with manufacturers, validating, improving the experience on the hardware side and the things that customers may not know about behind the scenes. This is small to many people, but a couple of years ago, if you had a problem with initiating a charging section, we would just get one error code, connection error. It didn't matter if that was because the charger messed up, the car timed out, the customer didn't plug it in right away. So Jeremy and Keith and all the folks at the EVgo Innovation Lab have worked. So now we get unique error codes so that we can be more helpful when a customer calls that call center, or just finding that feedback loop more helpful. Now, directly to your question, Delta, we're very excited about our partnerships with Delta and Signet and others. Delta has been the one that we've been rolling out a lot more lately. And I think what you can expect as an EVgo customer is far more 350 kilowatt chargers. We think that power sharing configuration is a cost-effective way to do that, and that given charging curves themselves, it's the thing that makes the most sense for not, having excess capacity out there. And we really are looking forward to making sure that more customers recognize that we are a network that, while we've been around a long time and therefore have some of the first stations that were out there, we are putting out the best-in-class technology. EVgo put out the first 150 kilowatt charger in the US, the first 350 kilowatt charger in the US, and now we're putting out what we think are the best 350 kilowatt chargers in the US.
So speaking of that, there's a few people asking about your installation of chargers. So last week we had people asking when they'll see EVgo chargers more on the East Coast side, and you also have a relationship or a thing with EVgo Pilot and Flying J partnership that one of our commenters mentions here as well. Yeah, so can you just talk about how that's going along, the installation process and like the East Coast kind of specifically?
Yeah. So look, the East Coast is a huge priority market. We've been opening up new stations up and down the seaboard, and frankly, just across the country. I think you all have seen that one of the big changes in the last couple of years has been as more automakers have finally rolled out longer range vehicles, they're starting to see adoption in markets that they weren't expecting, right? Florida and Texas were already really big Tesla markets. And I think that it kind of has turned some of the conventional wisdom from the incumbent automakers that thought it was all going to be about California and the ZEV states. And it's actually very clear that consumer demand for EVs is everywhere. So, we've done EVgo ribbon cuttings recently in Indiana and Maryland, right? So we're building all over the place because we recognize that that's important. And frankly, so do our partners, right? I think you all know that we have a partnership with General Motors to add 3,250 fast charging stalls to the EVgo network that will be available to everyone. It was very important to us and to GM so that it was an electric for all thing, not just a proprietary thing for GM customers. And to the Pilot Flying J partnership, GM was also involved in that. The difference is this will be through our EVgo Extend offering, where Pilot will own those chargers and we will operate them on their behalf. So it's using our experience, but on a corridor location that maybe was more of a priority for Pilot than EVgo, taking advantage of the footprint they already have and making sure that it's a convenient and reliable experience, whether you're driving around your city and using an EVgo station or driving to grandma's house and using a Pilot station powered by EVgo Extend.
Yep.
Jonathan, let me ask you this. Last time you were on the show, we talked about your pricing structure, and I brought up the fact that I thought it was poor. I think it's
you've
unfair.
Never been less than honest with me, so I appreciate
think it's unfair to the EVs that charge slowly, and typically the EVs that charge slowly are the less expensive EVs, the ones that, let's say economically challenged customers buy because they're less expensive, so they charge slower. And they end up paying more for the energy because EVgo's network was a time-based pricing structure. So at that time you had kind of smiled and said, keep an eye on this space in the future. Could you give us any updates on the company transitioning to kilowatt-hour based pricing, which I think you have to do? You're on mute.
Oh, you're mute. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's not going to work then. So what we talked about the last time I was on with regards to KWH pricing was two things. One, that we did still have this push and pull both inside the company and from our customers about, hey, I don't want somebody just staying on a charger forever once they're above 90% because there's no incentive to do that. True. And two, we know this is where the industry is going. We are going towards KWH pricing, but we're trying to make sure we're doing it thoughtfully. As you've seen, what we tested in California was not just kilowatt hour pricing, but it was kilowatt hour pricing plus time of use pricing, making sure that there's, not just a benefit to the grid, but also a benefit to other drivers, thinking about when it's really an optimal time and when it makes the most sense, and making sure that that's available as a way to drive utilization at different times of day. So since we've last spoken, and in fact, 10 days ago, we launched KWH pricing in 5 new states. So it's now not just California, but it's California, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Arizona, New Jersey, and Utah. And that's what you can expect to see, is us doing it in tranches as we learn more. We wanted to see how customers reacted to time of use and KWH, because frankly, as I said to a couple journalists last week, unfortunately, most Americans don't speak kilowatt or kilowatt hour. Right. I think we can make an exception for most of your listeners because this is a pretty sophisticated EV audience. But we've had some interesting examples of customers assuming one thing with KW and KWH, and we know that time is simple. And so trying to balance simplicity with the fairness point and the fact that as charge rates go up, it can be bad for us too. So trying to think through the pros and cons on the economics as well as the customer experience. We had a driver call us, and an educated, well-positioned driver call us and say, I don't understand why I don't get 50 kilowatts every time I plug into a 50 kilowatt charger. And we were like, well, are you there for an hour and are you charging at 50 kW the whole time? And the concept of a rate versus energy, our CTO ended up having to get on the phone with him because he didn't believe us about the fact that, 50 kilowatts is a rate, 150 kilowatts is a rate. The amount of time you're there, the rate your vehicle can charge. There was a Mach E driver going around complaining that he couldn't find a true 150 kilowatt charger anywhere until he found an EVgo one. And he mentioned that he happened to be at 20% when he found the EVgo one. It's like, well, the charging curve on that vehicle is such that you're not going to get 150 on a 350 kilowatt charger when you're above a certain percentage of charge. So Tom, it's a long way. I'm not evading the question. We're making the shift. We wanted to learn in California since that's where the bulk of the EVs still are. Now we've expanded to another 5 states, and we continue to evaluate what's next.
Yeah, and thank you. And I understand how people don't understand this. This is new. People are going to have to learn kilowatt hour base. But what they do understand is when that charging session is over, what that final dollar value is. And they know if they plugged in at 50%, they charge to 100%, and it cost them $20. The next time it should cost them $40 if they go 0 to 100. But with the time based, it skews that. If they plug in a low state of charge, you know, it might cost them $10 to get up to 30%. But then when they plug it at a high state of charge, it costs them $30 to add 30% of the battery. That's what's confusing. So I'm not going to let up on this until it's kilowatt hour based. And I'm totally fine with you charging more once the vehicle, say, gets above 80% or 85%, like, you know, 22 cents per kilowatt hour up to 80%, and then jump it up to 35 cents per kilowatt hour. Give them a penalty for hanging out when it's really slow. I would love that because, you know, I just last week sat behind an ID4 waiting for a 350 kilowatt charger while he charged to 100%, even though I offered him $20 to get the hell off the station and move over so I can plug in, but he wouldn't take it. He just like shrugged me off and sat there and kept reading his e-reader. So, you know, I'd be fine charging that guy 50 cents a kilowatt hour, but I digress.
Well, and Tom, that's actually a fantastic point because there are customers who are completely insensitive to pricing. What we hear from most people is that they think about it as what's the cost of a fill up, right? Like, whether they're there to go from 20 to 80, which is what everybody in the industry wants drivers to do, or they're there to top off, which is what a lot of drivers do anyway. They think about it as, okay, how long am I here? What am I getting? They're thinking about it in a rough term. So our average charging session cost is still around $10. Obviously, we'd love for people to spend more money there, but we know that people are there for different use cases. We have this one woman that called our call center and said, yeah, I have a charger at home, but I stop at an EVgo charging station on the way home from work every day for 5 minutes just to have confidence in case something happens. I forget to plug in, my power goes off. And she's not thinking about where she is in her charging curve and therefore how many kWh she's getting. She's paying for peace of mind.
Interesting. So I say I just bought a brand new Cadillac Lyriq and I want to use this Autocharge Plus. What do I have to do to get onto the system? To give it, I have to give my credentials somewhere, my credit card number or something, right?
Yeah, well, with GM, we've integrated so that you would have the choice of signing up for EVgo Autocharge Plus either in your EVgo app or in your My Cadillac app. But the concept being, you have to have an account there. And so you have an EVgo account that's linked to your, in this case, your vehicle. And the way you would do it is you'd open up the EVgo app, you'd scan or manually enter in your VIN. You would request, it would confirm that your Lyriq is eligible for Autocharge Plus as it is. And then you would request to enroll. And the next time you go to a charging station, it would say, confirm this is the vehicle you want to enroll in Autocharge. Okay. And that's it. After that, every time subsequent, you would plug in and it would work. I did that with some Lyriqs last week when I was out in Michigan, and I'm doing it with my own vehicle now.
So did you get to drive some of these Lyriqs?
Did I what?
Did you get to drive some of these Lyriqs?
No, they just wanted me to show some journalists how the technology worked on the charging side. But it was a gorgeous car. It is prettier in person than it is in the pictures, and it's good looking in pictures.
Yeah, I really enjoyed driving too. I'm really dying to hear other people's impressions of the driving experience. But all right, anyone else have some questions?
Can I dive in quickly? I've got 3 ones on my mind.
Yeah.
And then I'll hand over to Kyle. Okay, first one. Jonathan, more and more car makers are offering free charging with charging networks when you buy a brand new car, which sounds great because we all love stuff for free. But does that lead to what Tom just described of someone who has no insight into pricing? It's like giving away free petrol with a car, but you had to be at the petrol pump for an hour blocking that space. What's your thoughts on people's relationship moving to electric vehicles, of how they value what a kilowatt hour is, and should we be giving away free charging to people?
And there's like 4 questions in that one question,
Sorry.
Martin. No, it's fine. I think we should make sure that we know that that's a lot of questions, so that Kyle doesn't feel bad when he's got his 400. So let's break that down, right? One is I'm going to reject the sitting at the charger for an hour based on where we are with the technology now, that you can fill up in a hell of a lot more time than that, or a hell of a lot less time than that, right? You can get your 20 to 80% in your 15 to 45 minutes, depending on your vehicle and the charger and everything else. Secondly, I think, we've been doing this for a while too, right? With Nissan, with the Chevy Bolt, we announced an unlimited deal with Toyota for charging as well, and with the Cadillac Lyriq. The automakers want to make sure that customers have confidence when they drive off the lot. For a lot of those customers, it's an insurance policy. For other customers, it's what they're going to rely on to make sure they have it. Now, if you get into the philosophical public policy side of my brain, it's hard to kind of think about things in a way other than the cheapest charging for you should always be at home, so that if you don't have a home charging option, you don't get displaced by somebody who does. But at the same time, that convenience, that reliability, that incentive is why automakers want to partner with networks like EVgo to provide free charging. And in this stage of the industry, it's still early. You all are early adopters. You understand this, but selling to my mom or my mother-in-law, being able to say, you don't have to worry about charging, whether that's the first $500 or the first year or two, that's a very powerful statement. Now, we need to make sure we're balancing that with building enough chargers so that people aren't blocked out by folks using it. And so you do have what we don't like chicken and egg. We like peanut butter and jelly. We like having the complementarity of enough chargers for people to be able to use the vehicles and enough vehicles using the chargers so that it's economic to build more chargers, and so on and so forth. So my philosophy is automakers should keep working with EVgo to make sure that we put charging credits and programs out there so that people understand. The number one question I still get from my friends and family that don't have EVs is, why can I do this? How can I do it if there isn't charging near me? And part of it is as simple as pulling out the PlugShare app and showing them there's charging closer than you think there is. And part of it is, hey, did you know if you buy that BZ4X or if you buy that Lyriq, you have an EVgo charging program and not think about it?
Second question. I really believe that fleets are going to move the needle very much as businesses get on board, as more are already. But that means taking vehicles home. And a lot of work vans or work trucks are stored at home. And sometimes this is a solution for home charging as well. You don't want to be paying for electricity for your employer, but equally, why should they pay for your miles to go to the shops? And then with adding in that layer of Autocharge Plus, where you just plug in, it just starts charging. What are your thoughts on how we kind of get around this? We all want the automatic nature of just plugging in and the car charges, but increasingly, a lot of people are going to be driving vehicles that aren't their own. And is it a case of how do we solve that billing problem? This is kind of more of a wider question.
Yeah, well, it's a huge question. Fleets are a tremendous opportunity for electrification because of the lower total cost of ownership of the EV over the life of the vehicle. So we just announced a partnership with a logistics company called MHX for a Class 8 truck charging project. That's obviously not going to have this problem because nobody's bringing a Class 8 truck to their driveway and plugging in their garage. But it does underscore that fleets have a bunch of different needs that are going to have to be met, right? EVgo has 3 different offerings that we offer in combination to fleets because we know some drivers just are going to need access to the public network. And that's what we do with our friends at Uber and Lyft, as well as some other fleets that know that that's a simple solution for them. We know some will need behind the fence charging at their depot. That's what we do with the autonomous vehicle fleets. That's what we do with the truck fleets that we mentioned and some of the others. And then we know some will need dedicated charging away from their own base. And that's what we do with the autonomous vehicle fleets. And we're working with some others because you need all of them. For the billing, some of it is telematics integration. Every fleet manager has their own telematics program they're using. Some of it is additional software capabilities. Some of it is trial and error. And some of it is, until it all gets sorted out, that good old fashioned reimbursement program, but that's not scalable. So it goes directly to your point.
Okay, final question, and then I'll shut up. I interviewed you in 2018. You wouldn't remember this when I had a wildly unpopular podcast, which had made 200 episodes at the time. 4 years ago, I think you were VP of strategy or something like that then. And now I'm up to like 1,600 podcasts 4 years later, when I'm still a nobody with a slightly more popular podcast. Can you zoom out a little bit? And in the last 4 years since we spoke, what as an industry, in terms of charging, have we got right, and where have we screwed up? And how do we how do we learn from our errors and make sure that charging going forward, we learn from any mistakes we've made?
So first of all, I do remember that interview.
No, come on, you're being nice.
No, I do remember that interview because I did have people reach out to me and say, why were you on a British podcast? And I was like, well, it's not a British podcast. He's got a global reach. Yeah. But I do remember it was one of my first ones. And I think that may have been the one where you introduced me to the term dog fooding.
Oh, well,
About eating my own dog food and making sure that I was using my charging network. So that was memorable, and I think proof that I'm not making up that I remember you. In terms of what have we gotten right and what have we gotten wrong, I think as an industry, not just charging, but an EV ecosystem, one of the things we've gotten right is a lot more models and a lot more offerings, right? I think one of the challenges for a very long time was you had automakers still believing this myth that there wasn't sufficient consumer demand. And any EV reservation and wait list will tell you there's plenty of demand right now. And having different types of models is really key to success. That's why you see people not just buying the EV6 but also the Niro, buying the Ioniq 5 and buying the Kona, right? Like buying the Bolt EUV and the Lyriq, where you want people to have those different choices. It took too long to get there, right? And it would have been great because for companies like EVgo, we deployed in some markets, but well before there were sufficient vehicles, and that was painful. I think we also have this is going to sound a little weird because we believe that it's important to be deploying 350 kilowatt chargers, and we continue to do it, but we overhyped the importance of 350 qua 350, right? The whole industry has been talking about it for a long time, and really the Hummer is the first vehicle that can actually do it. So even the ones that were hyped as 350 or 270, which is still great. But what we should have been talking about was doing some of this education on kilowatt hours, on voltage. We have a long way to go because we still have a challenge where the plurality of calls to our 24/7 customer care center are people doing their first ever charge because they either never thought they would, the dealer never told them what to do, they have no idea what to do. And so we spend a lot of time and money, frankly, on customer education. And we need to do it proactively as opposed to when they're at the stall so that they can have that experience.
Right on. Is that good? Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah,
Kyle's been jumping a bit.
Yeah, we're running up on time, of course, but
Yeah.
I think it's really important just at a high level for some of our audience who may not be familiar with EVgo, just to pull out, understand your business model and how it's different from some of your competitors. For example, ChargePoint pretty much doesn't manage their network. They sell the hardware and then charge money to run the back-end services to connect everything up. So ChargePoint themselves, they're not taking the risk of permitting, putting stuff in the ground and doing all of that. Electrify America, of course, has to spend money. And part of that is the benefit to EV drivers where we now have corridor charging. I can drive from New York to LA, New York to Miami, and not even think about it. Just get in the car and go regardless of which automaker I'm driving at the time. However, what EVgo is doing is really going about it on your own. Of course, you'll take government grants, incentives to help put chargers in the ground, but you're buying the chargers, speccing the equipment, putting them in the ground, and then also managing the network on the back end, which brings up, where does most of the income for EVgo come from? Does it come from the actual chargers that are rolling up and charging? Is that your real customer? Or is it the automaker partnerships that are funding the network so that normal people can roll up and charge and pay a small fee for that electricity?
Well, first of all, Kyle, you've just explained that better than virtually anybody else has in terms of the difference of business models. So I'm going to need you to go do that in every state capital and in every publication, because the amount of reporters and investor analysts and policymakers that don't understand that is unquantifiable. And so thank you for doing that. Secondly, because we do own and operate the vast majority of our assets, and there's some exceptions as we've talked about with the EVgo Extend offering, some of our fleet programs where the customer wants to own. But generally speaking, that means that the bulk of our revenue is from drivers using our chargers. So we are very incented to make sure that they work, because if a charger is broken, not only is that driver unhappy, we have missed a revenue opportunity. So that's partially why that owner-operator model has been really key to our foundational learnings and what we can apply to fleets and others. And it means we have to deliver a great customer experience. That's why we thought Autocharge Plus was so important, because it's not just about, can I get electrons anywhere? It's where will it be easy? Where will it be fun? It's even one of those things where, I don't know, I think you all know this story, but we give all of our chargers a human name because it was Kathy's idea, our CEO, because we don't want a customer to say, hey, it's, charger TX0052. If they have an issue, we want to be able to say, Bob won't work, can you turn him on? And we see people taking selfies. It's why we started doing EV Goats because we started having this internal conversation about who's the EV greatest of all time. And then customers heard about it. They loved it. And so we started mailing out plush goats to the customers that were charging the most in their region. And we're seeing people love them. And in fact, if you come to the LA Auto Show and go to our booth, we're going to have some live EV goats for the first time. And so that experience of being fun and layering on new software offerings, reservations, EVgo access, so you can use a QR code to open a parking garage, some coupons that we've been doing through EVgo Advantage. Delivering that experience is really important so that we can generate additional revenue streams, but also so that customers want to come back to us. And it's not just, oh, I'll go anywhere. It's, I'll go at a great location where it's convenient, it's fast charging, it's clean, it's fun, and it's great.
I just want to choose where my charger goes. I want a Kyle charger. Needs to be here in Colorado. Roll up, and it's got to be the biggest, baddest, fastest charger you guys
1,000 amps.
install. Yeah, 1,000 amps up to 1,000 volts. That's what I'm talking about.
Kyle, I have good and bad news for you. The good news is that Kyle already exists as a charger. The bad news is that it meets none of those specs. It's
Is it
in
like an old
It's
50
one
kilowatt?
of our earlier deployments of a 50 kilowatt unit.
Oh,
So
no.
we will have to have a conversation with our marketing team and our technical team about seeing if we can get a Kyle charger at one of our new stations in Colorado. Since that's a market we've been very active in expanding in.
Yeah, and we use the chargers around. I've been to some of your station opening parties and things that are happening around here. We have a really thankful to have some real big boy chargers in the area, because for a while you were the only charge point operator that actually had 500 amp capable chargers in our area. So it actually made my job possible to review how cars charge. So pretty thankful for that. Can't say they're 100% reliable. Sometimes I roll up and they don't work, but that's a topic for another day. So we need to.
But it's an important topic, and it goes to something that someone asked in the chat too, right? Yeah. Which is, what are we doing with our older chargers, and what are we doing to make sure that we're doing reliability better, right? We have a financial incentive to do it, so it's really important. It's been a big challenge, right? It's an early industry. We've been working with a diversity of suppliers to get the best technology, but there are learning bumps in the road and learning curves. So we announced a week or two ago, it's hard to keep track of time in a post-COVID era, or still COVID era. We announced a program that we call EVgo Renew, and it's about upgrading chargers, replacing chargers, retiring chargers when need be. So what we've done to date this year is we've upgraded or retired or replaced 125 charging stalls, and we're in active conversations with our site hosts now about another round. And as Kathy said on our earnings call, this isn't a one and done campaign. This is an ongoing, for the future. We'll always be looking at where to EVgo Renew, because the technology will keep shifting. We'll learn new things. We'll see that there's a place where we maybe don't want to be anymore, or a place where it's better to rip out a charger than to have one that's terribly unreliable. And so that's the conversation that we're having internally and externally with our site host partners to say, how do we give customers the best possible experience?
Right on.
I know we're up against the time, but I want to squeeze one more quick question in, Dom.
Sure.
Jonathan, in the Northeast area, and somebody else asked about, East Coast, I think it's a little underserved with high power, newer EVgo stations. Most of them around here are the older 50 kilowatt units. However, you did install one in, I think, North Brunswick, which is a 200 kilowatt site. And I was excited to go down and check it out. And what I did realize once I got there was this was 200, it's 200, it can deliver 200 kilowatt to 1,000 volt system. So in my opinion, and EVgo isn't the only company that does this. They market the stations as what their highest output can be, even though very few vehicles would be able to do that. Now, while I was there, I had one person complaining because I was setting up my cameras and everything. They noticed that I kind of knew what I was doing. So they asked me why their vehicle would never pull more than like 75 or 80 kilowatts. And I explained to them, you have a 400 volt battery system, and it's going to be limited here. And they were just blown away by, like, well, how can they say it's a 200 kilowatt system if my car and they didn't realize the fact that the matter is most EVs would never be able to pull more than 80 kilowatt from that. Now, no, it's not your job to educate everybody, but what could the networks be doing? And everybody does this, not just EVgo. I complain to Electro America about it all the time also. What can you guys do? Is there anything you can do to try to help make people understand what to expect? I know you can't have signs on the stations listing what every vehicle can do, but can you on your website say, have like a special page on maybe explaining this to people?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Tom, because you've already hit the nail on the head. My Ioniq 5 is gonna get a lot closer to 200 kW on that charger. And one of your commenters asked, when are we gonna get 100 kilowatt capable CHAdeMO chargers out there? We do have 100 kilowatt capable CHAdeMO chargers out there, but because of the architecture, they are de facto, 80 kilowatt chargers. So and then you overlay that again with the concept of what's your state of charge? Was the battery preconditioned? All those things. And somebody else, I think News Cologne, put out this comment of, can we start rating DC feed by amperage? And frankly, that you still have the same problem. A, nobody knows, and so we do have some experts here. But B, the vehicle still has to ask for a certain amount of charge from the charger. So we end up in this situation where you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, where you say, hey, your car can take this, but if the car doesn't ask for it, or you're at 50% or 70%, we're still going to get the same challenge. So we do need to do a better job on education. All of us do. We're working with the automakers as well. We even had a conversation with one about a week or so ago of, do we need to do something that's the equivalent of flipping open a gas tank and saying, hey, this is recommended for 87 or 89 octane and it can take E15 or E85? Do we need to do that? So when the customer opens the charging port, it's a max charge, and then we can have this, because what we can't have is an eye chart of, if you're at this state of charge and you're driving a Polestar 2, you can get this, but if you're at this state of charge and you're driving a Mitsubishi i-MiEV, you can only get this. Right? That's not scalable. It doesn't work. So we do have to figure out the right balance of, how do we make it easy? How do we get better customer expectations? How do we do a little bit better of this? So one of the things that we've launched in our app is an EV 101, so that while you're at the charger, you have some information, and the displays, if you've seen these on the new chargers that we put out there, our new display units are saying, here's the voltage, here's the amperage. It puts it on there so that if you are one of those few customers that knows, you'll see real time, oh, I am getting 500 sustained amps, or oh, I am getting whatever else it is. And to Christian's point, we do have this issue too of, yes, if you've got a station that has a 100 kilowatt charger and a 350 kilowatt charger, it would be great if the Leaf and the Bolt only went to the 100 and the Hummer and the Ioniq 5 only went to the 350. But you don't want to turn them away when the 100's full or something else, and you don't want to sow more confusion of the, oh, I can only use that one. So this is one where we do have to collaborate across the rest of the EV charging industry, the automakers, policymakers, organizations like Veloz. We have to work together on a lot of education here. But the most important thing right now, get more butts in seats, get more chargers built, and get more vehicles using those chargers.
Yeah, but if someone's bought themselves a nice shiny new car and it's not charging how it should do, what are they going to blame? Their nice new car or the charger? And people, in my experience, people always blame the charge networks, because the idea of, oh, hang on, this is my nice new car, I'm so proud of it. Like, what could be wrong with that? There could be nothing wrong with it. It could just be that it's on a version of software that the car makers haven't talked to the charging equipment manufacturers or the operators. And I think I've seen huge improvements over the last few years about that. But it's people default into blaming the charger, and sometimes it is, often it's not.
Yeah,
that's also my experience, Martin.
So, well, think about it. Think about how confusing it is. If they pull up to a DC fast charger that says it's 150 kilowatt DC fast charger, and they pull 125 kilowatts, and then they pull up to the your station that says 200 kilowatts, and the most they're getting is 80. It's very confusing. And what they do, of course, they're going to blame the charging station.
In Europe, Tom, there's a lot of chargers that say, if your vehicle's an 800 volt class of vehicle, expect this, and then they have a 400 volt. So they actually distinguish based off the class.
That's what I was asking Jonathan. Can we do something like that here? I think
it's worth looking at. It's worth considering, Tom. I'm happy to keep having some internal conversations about it. We've been thinking about this a lot, because we do still have the problem of, okay, well then my car's at 60%. Why am I not getting close to that max rate? So we have to work on all these things together.
Yeah, you can't solve everything, but there, it's our, we're hoping to try to simplify this. Let's do it one step at a time. You're not going to be able to have a chart and say at 70%, at 30 degrees, at 80 degrees, temperature, all this stuff. But let's start helping people explain it with, like what Kyle said, what he experienced in Europe. Maybe starting with 800, 400. Let people absorb that for a while, and then maybe we can get more in the weeds a year or two down the road. But I think we need to do something to explain to people that there's different classes of battery, power, and that's going to dictate how fast you charge.
I know it's not my role, but can I ask you all a question?
Yeah.
Do you think that, so I know Kyle had this experience where he exceeded his expectation of a rate of charge on one of his tests recently. Do we think that'll make customers freak out if they say, hey, at 800 volt vehicle at this amperage, you're going to get this, and then suddenly they're above that? Do you think that's something that would make them think something's wrong?
I don't think so. I don't think most people pay attention to it like us. We stand there and stare at it when we're doing recordings. I don't think a lot of people stare at it like that. I think they check it once in a while, Jonathan. So, I don't think so personally.
Yeah.
But so we have to get on to the news and what we've been driving. I hate to cut this conversation short. I mean, not short, but we've gone a lot longer than
supposed to be 25 minutes.
We had envisioned.
What a surprise. We went long. What a surprise.
But obviously this means we need to talk more about charging. And so I'd like to thank you, Jonathan, for coming on and being with us. And maybe we can have you back sometime when you have some more news about, the rollout of an EVgo station at my house.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to come on. Hey, it doesn't even need to necessarily be news, because it's always good to speak with you all. And again, from the comments, I kind of want to take a copy and paste of all these comments and start recruiting for testimonials. Right.
So where can people find you if they have questions? Can they find you anywhere?
I mean, I'm in DC if they want to find me in my house. But as far as the, obviously there's the plug of follow EVgo on all of our social networks, especially, Instagram. I'm not on our TikTok, but we have a very vibrant TikTok, I'm told. And we are happy to do all sorts of interactions. And one of the things we've been doing, Kyle mentioned Jeremy, because of this customer education piece, that technical translation is really important. And Jeremy is this phenomenal technical guy who can also speak to people like me. And so we do sometimes Instagram live Ask Me Anythings with Jeremy. You can find me as well. I'm at JohnDC51 on Twitter until it implodes. But we've got all sorts of other official EVgo social interfaces, and we are constantly rolling out these things, in addition to some ribbon cuttings and other events that we'll be at. Yeah, there you go. You found Jeremy is one of our best technical spokespeople. I'm just our official spokesperson.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. And I guess we'll let you go, and we'll see you again when we see you.
Thanks
a lot, guys.
All right.
We'll be posting Jonathan's cell phone number in the description of this video. If you arrive at an EVgo station and it doesn't work, Jonathan said, just give him a call.
Any time of day.
Meanwhile,
he heard that. He's backstage.
Put Kyle's cell phone number there.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
So let me see. So yeah, let's hit the real news stories real quick and get to the good stuff that we've been driving this week. So the big news this week has to be the debut of the Volvo EX90. This is a direct replacement for the outgoing XC90. Unlike the C and XC40, there is no gas version of this car. It sits on the same SPA2 platform as the Polestar 3, but it's slightly longer and has a third row, allowing for up to 7 passengers. Like the Polestar 3, it will have a 111 kilowatt-hour pack. Usable energy is 107. Range is said to be 372 miles WLTP. And Andre Nadalia, who attended the unveiling in Sweden and wrote up the debut post, and an Everything We Know post, so we'll keep updated with everything that we know about the Volvo EX90. He says that the EPA rating will probably be about 15% less. So I did the math on it, and I came up with 316 miles. I'm not a math expert, so but I think if you all do the math for yourselves, you'll find it around above 300 miles. But we'll have to wait until we actually drive it on the roads to see how it performs in the real world. So maximum charge rate is 250 kilowatts, which is great for a 400 volt system, but to reach that, it can only accept up to 600 amps. I mean, it can accept up to 600 amps. So the fly in the ointment here is that DC fast chargers, as we were just saying, may not put out 600 amps. And in fact, I don't know if any of them really do. So they say that it can charge from 10 to 80% in about 30 minutes, but we'll have to do our own testing to see how that works on the infrastructure that's out there. And and it has a bidirectional 11 kilowatt AC onboard charger, so you can export energy as well. So trying to run through these specs real quick because we're kind of short on time. So excuse my quickness. I'll try to be clear though. So the X90 has a pair of permanent magnet motors that together produce 510 horsepower, 380 kilowatts, 617 pound-feet of torque. Later versions of the car might only have a single motor. They didn't come out and say that specifically, but you can read in between the lines. Andre says that this one should do 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds with that power output. So we often talked about the quality of Volvo sound systems, and this one should not disappoint. It's got a reference quality, Bowers and Wilkin audio system featuring Dolby Atmos as a Volvo first, plus a headrest integrated speakers for full immersive sound. It's got a full suite of sensors to help guide its assisted driving function they call Pilot Assist, and that includes a LiDAR sensor that sits on the pod at the top of the windshield. So, Kyle, you seem pretty excited about this car when we spoke the other day. What is it that you particularly like about it?
Oh, I just love Volvos. I'm actually driving this week, of course, the Hummer EV, but I also have the XC60 T8 with the new extended range plug-in system, which I'm not a PHEV guy, but so I'm not making any videos on it. Some of our team will, but it has the same wool interior that this is offered with, which is incredible.
Looks
really
good.
Cool. Oh, it's one of the best materials. Love it. Don't put dogs in it though, because you cannot get dog hair out of the wool. We'll have a whole out of spec detailing episode on that. But back to the EX90, this thing rocks. Holy smokes. So, when SPA 1 launched in 2015, 2016 with XC90, that really set the stage for the trickle down effect of the rest of the Volvo lineup. And so now everything from XC90 to XC40 and the sedans and wagons in between really followed that visual form factor of the XC90. Now they're launching with EX90, and we can only expect the same thing is going to happen with electrification. This is setting the stage for how the rest of the Volvo electric lineup will look for the next maybe 7+ years. And I think it looks incredible. I think the specs are pretty good. Volvos are never about performance driving unless you get the Polestar optimized ones. But even then, they can never touch a BMW or Mercedes rival in terms of outright performance. It's about a little bit, as we call it, Swede speed. So it's just a Nordic way of traveling down the road. And I think visually it looks great. Volvo puts a lot of time into their interiors, making sure that they're A, safe, but B, ergonomic to use and to feel comfortable. Sound systems out of this world with their Bowers and Wilkins specking for their 90 chassis cars. I can only expect that to get better here. And what's interesting is it's a front motor, primary axle, rear motor, secondary axle. And so that's been my kind of performance issue with these cars. But at the end of the day, you do get more regen if you're using front motor primarily. And honestly, a little bit more predictable handling. I'm not going to say it's better in the snow front wheel drive because the weight's pretty much evenly distributed across the chassis. But love everything about this. I was like, do not show this to Alyssa because then she's going to want to trade her E-Tron for one. But what an awesome vehicle. They knocked it out of the park with this thing.
Right on. So we don't want to spend a whole lot of time. I mean, I would like to spend a whole lot of time because it's a beautiful looking car, but there's still some info that we don't have about it. I think it's going to be built in South Carolina, North Carolina.
South Carolina, right outside of Charleston.
There you go. And right alongside the Polestar 3. So anybody else have any comments they want to talk about this, Tom?
Well, I think exterior looks great. Love the dash layout. I don't love that vertical screen. It kind of at first glance looks like a 2012 Model S. I know the materials are nicer and it's definitely more premium, but not really in love with that. But that's personal preference. It's interesting they talk about 250 kilowatt DC fast charging. When you're not going to see more than 200 kilowatts in the real world out there. There's not any 600 amp charging stations.
The Signets will output 690 we've seen.
And the connectors can deliver.
They're not spec for it, but we've seen, especially on Electrify America, we had a whole podcast episode on the Out of Spec podcast about this.
Because that violates the spec.
Violates the spec, but gives the power. That's all I care about. Give me the power. I don't care about regulations.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to hear how the connector and cable manufacturers view this. That it's that the vehicle and the station will be able to deliver more than what they're spec for. So, I kind of err on the side of caution more than Kyle on some of these topics. But, that's interesting, Kyle, that we'll see it out there. But that would be something that, too bad we didn't, Jonathan wasn't on beforehand, because I'd love to talk to him about, what, his thoughts about that is. But anyway, we don't have time to move on. I think it looks awesome. Don't love the interior. And I think it's going to be a great driving vehicle. And I know I have one family member that is like an XC90 guy's owned like 6 of them. This is right in his will. He kept asking me, when am I going to get an XC90 all electric? So this is, I think he's going to be in line for one of the first ones that he's in the US.
And if you're a Volvo owner, you love this. And if you are trying to wrestle someone who's a Range Rover buyer away, or someone who is a BMW X5 owner, repeated purchase, who love those brands, I think they're doing all the right things to keep their base and expand it and be attractive to buyers who haven't got a choice. You can't buy an electric Range Rover. So really smart.
Until next year.
Sure, you can. It's called an RS1.
R1S, yeah.
R1S, yeah, exactly. So yeah, doing all the right things.
All right. So let's move on to the next thing. So during the unveiling, actually, of the X90, Volvo played a bit of a video with the silhouette of a smaller car parked in front of the EX90, also in silhouette. The number 2023 flashed on the screen behind the car, leading us to believe that the next year we'll be hearing about a smaller electric Volvo coming. So Autoblog shot the video on our post, and they thought it might be an EX60 because of the size, but I think it's a lot smaller than that personally. And I was hoping to get your feedback on it. We don't have to talk about this for very long, but I just want to get your all's impression, because I'm thinking it's like a BMW i3 size kind of thing.
And we need it's an EX30, isn't it?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I thought they talked about that.
No, I don't
maybe
know.
it's not. I mean, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm just
Martin, do you know something you shouldn't be saying?
I've got to go get the door. My doorbell
Just
rang.
mute.
So we do need more premium small cars, and I think this looks like I don't know, Tom. Do you think this is like an i3 size or around there?
I don't think. It's hard for me to tell, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I would think so. The i3 was deceivingly big. Like it looked like it was a tiny micro car, but then you walked up to it and it's like, God, this is a compact SUV. So
Right.
I almost think that the i3 is bigger than that.
Right. Okay. So it might be even smaller than maybe like a Sparkish Bolt. I don't know. Bigger than a Spark. Yeah. Yeah.
No, this is going to be, we know what Volvo is going for. They're going for, wagons, SUVs, very clearly an SUV. It's going to be similar in size to XC40. We're going to see a 90, a 60, and a 40. They're just going to keep it. It works.
Right.
People buy each one. And so no surprise here. Volvo will electrify their entire brand. They claim by 2030. I think we'll see that extended. I think they would give up too much market share if they went fully electric by 2030. The world is not ready for that yet, but certain markets are. Should be interesting, but I think they knocked it out of the park with this thing.
That picture looks way smaller than XC40 though, Kyle. If you look, unless the angle is deceiving,
We'll see it when they reveal it.
Right. Kylan in the comments says that the EX30 was trademark, so maybe it is XC30. Nathan Green likes it. He canceled his Rivian reservation, reserves the Volvo. Whoa, those are some moves. That's interesting. All right. But we should move along because, as we said, we don't have a lot of time. The Audi E-Tron has been around since 2018, and it's just gotten a refresh and a new name. It's now officially the Audi Q8 E-Tron. It has a fresh face, 2 choices of battery size, and more range. It comes in both regular and Sportback flavors. It's got 3 trim levels, the 50, the 55, and the S. They're all-wheel drive, and the S actually has 3 motors and puts out 496 horsepower, 717 pound-feet of torque, allowing it to zip to 60 miles an hour in 4.5 seconds. The S top speed is 130 miles an hour. That's the fastest one as well. The cells in the new battery packs are said to be about 20% more energy dense than the previous ones. So the 50 trim gets the 95 kilowatt hour pack gross, 89 kilowatt hour net. But the The 55 and the S get a 114 kilowatt hour pack gross with a 104 kilowatt hour net. The Sportback gets a bit more range than the Squareback, 373 miles WLTP compared to 360 miles. The smaller battery pack is rated for 311 miles WLTP in the Sportback and 298 in the Squareback. Charging wise, comes with an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, upgradable to 22 kilowatts. DC fast charge peaks at 150 kWs in the smaller battery version and 170 kilowatts in the larger. So they say charging to 80% takes 28 minutes for the small battery, 31 for the large. You can think of it as 30 minutes basically. So Kyle, you have an e-tron, an Audi e-tron in your family garage and have often talked about how it's a charging monster. Does this appear to continue in that fast charging tradition? And also, if you didn't have your eyes on another SUV, would this apparent range improvement be enough to talk you into trading for a newer one?
So a lot to unpack there. First
Right.
of all, this thing looks awesome. The specs are good. Glad they upgraded the battery. But what the heck are they doing with the charging? This is what I don't understand. Audi is cool enough. They understand what the consumers want. They gave us their theoretical maximum DC fast charging curve. So we know under ideal conditions how the car should charge 0 to 100% on a kilowatt thing. So that saves me a whole 6 hours of work. Thank you very much, Audi. The thing is, it doesn't charge as well as our current e-tron. For the same amount of time from 0 to 80 or 10 to 80, you get more kilowatt hours. So you could look at it that way. That's awesome. But what's impressive is our battery pack in our e-tron, we have the 55, is smaller, but it just sits at 150. And I've seen a peak of 173 kilowatts on our car. So bigger battery, not as much of a peak or compared, the C rate has gone down, and they're definitely slowing this thing down up in the pack. So I think the magic of the e-tron might be lost here with this vehicle a little bit. Certainly you're getting more energy, more range. That's great. But that 60 to 80% charging rate doesn't look good. I can't wait to compare it to our current e-tron, because one of our favorite things about it is how it charges. Now, granted, we don't really ever leave our town with it, so we never DC fast charge it. We've only taken it on one trip, but it was across the country, and that was pretty nice. But yeah, I mean, I actually would consider upgrading our e-tron to the e-tron S. We have a local Audi dealer here in town who we're friends with, so certainly I'm going to go by and be like, oh, what do the numbers look like on this? But our e-tron's going in for some upgrades this week. We're going to lower it, black it out, put some wheels on it, make it look pretty sinister. So that'll be kind of fun.
That's cool. Looking forward to seeing that. Tom, any thoughts on the Audi e-tron the Q8 Audi e-tron?
So love the looks. Think it looks awesome. I mean, I always liked how the e-tron looked, and this one, they absolutely nailed it. I think it looks tremendous. I'm not as far as the charging goes, one of the things I love to see is when the cars are pulling at least 100 kilowatt to 80%. It looks like this will. They didn't improve the on their previous charging, which was fantastic. As Kyle said, they might have even taken a step or two back, but these are different cells, so they probably have different capability. I'm sure Audi engineers know how far they can push them. Nailing 10 to 80 in a half an hour, that's kind of like, you don't want to be much more than that. So it's not terrible. It's a couple of minutes slower than the previous version would have been. So I don't look at it as a major step back, but you always want to see it get better as it moves forward, not stay the same or take a step or two back. So maybe Audi learned, from the existing e-tron, that they needed to back off a little bit. Maybe they were seeing more degradation than what they wanted to on EVs on their vehicles that charged consistently on DC fast chargers. So, I'm sure there's reasons why they seem to pull the charging rate back a little bit from the first gen.
Yeah, reliability and degradation is always a concern.
But nice work, Audi, keeping the tri-motor crazy drifting 500 horsepower monster that the e-tron S is. On paper, it doesn't really sound like much, but driving it, I did a whole driving review of e-tron S, and it's magical. That's the first dual motor system in the rear that actually does hardcore torque vectoring and tries to step the rear out. And Audi has forgotten the word understeer in the last 5 years. It's pretty amazing.
Can I also thank the Germans for lining everything up? Because it just helps my brain and also helps to explain what cars are. Because to have a sub-brand called E-Tron, like Hyundai have got Ioniq, but then to have an actual car called the E-Tron was just messed with my brain more than it should have done. So it's great that if you want a saloon, you buy the A range. If you want the SUV, you buy the Q, and that's whatever that is, Q 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8. And then if you want it sporty, buy the SQ, and we know that means there's going to be an RSQ.
But this is
one day
scary, Martin, because the E-Tron's not that big of a car. It's like a bigger Q5.
Right, yeah, I saw 8 was a little bit big of a number for it.
The flagship Q8, like top of the. It's not. If you buy, go and drive a Q7 or a Q8, and you're like, "Wow, this is a nice car."
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of worries me. That will we not see a 3-row electric SUV from Audi?
That's a good shout.
Can
and
I
also
call it
with that extra level of luxury, that extra level of all the toys and gizmos, that's a good shout, actually.
Yeah, so that has me a little bit worried because we love our E-Tron. We would certainly, Alyssa's like so into this thing. She's like, you can't pry it from my hands. She actually drove the R1S last week, and she's like, I kind of don't want it. She wants to keep her Audi.
Wow.
She prefers it over the Rivian, and so that's why we might actually upgrade to the new Q8 E-Tron because that's just what she likes. But I don't know. We need 3 rows. We need big SUVs that are electric. That's what people buy. It may not be what people want others to buy, but that's what people buy. And if this is, I think regular Q8's not a 3-row right now. The Q7 is similar chassis. The Q8's like the Sportback-y version, but it's like this is nowhere near on that level.
Right.
So the R1S is the only 3-row out there right now, right?
No, EQS SUV.
Oh, that's right, the EQS.
And Model X.
Oh yeah.
And Model Y.
The Model
Y. And EQB.
I'm not counting the Model Y. That's
well, if you small kids,
you can't fit in the back.
That's ridiculous.
I can't. But the what's called it? The other one that we started to show off with the Volvo.
Right, but that's not yet out yet.
It's got it's got a 3rd row.
Yes.
And Andre said he's 6 foot and he could fit in the back without contorting his legs too badly or something. So that's nice.
Yeah. R1S 3rd row rocks though.
Kyle, you could buy one of these. Which one? The new Volvo, the new E-Tron, or an iX?
Oh, I know. This is what kept me up last night. I'm like, all of these new cars are so good.
I know, right?
All right, so what's your
Cadillac?
Which one?
Honestly, it sounds weird, but probably the one that I had to live with, I'd get an E-Tron S.
Really?
Okay.
Interesting. And also because it's now being replaced, call it a mid-cycle refresh or whatever you want to do, because it's being replaced from spring next year, the residuals for E-Trons, I think, are one of the most... If you want a car like that, add it to your shopping list, and it'll change around the world. But over here as well, you get a really, really nice, decent S-Line for 50,000. And there's something weird about the residuals of the Audi E-Tron. There's a lot of them for sale as well, which shows their popularity. But they haven't held their value like a Mercedes-Benz EQC, which you probably can't get in one for less than 60, even used, and a nice one. And so, if you're thinking, I want to buy an electric car, and you either a company car or you've got that amount of money to spend, it should definitely be on your shopping list. A used one, get one with 5 or 10,000.
In the US, it hasn't translated that well for the higher trim ones. So, like, you can definitely get. There was a point in time where E-Tron Prestige 55s, like our car, were 49 to 52,000. And then, of course, the weird, crazy car thing happened, but also infrastructure went in, which has pulled up the price of EVs disproportional to the rest of other cars. And we paid, I think, 70,000 for ours or something like this used. But of course, that was in the height of like, don't buy a car. We just needed a car. So I think they're not as depreciation heavy as they are in Europe, Martin.
Do you get the 50 where you are?
No.
No, that could be why. It could be. I think the 50 drags it down as well, because you can pick up, because of what is it's a big motorway cruiser with a battery that's far too small, and it's a pretty thirsty and inefficient as well. So what is the 50? I mean, you're not going to be doing a bazillion miles in that by a 55. So I think that pulls it down as well. If you aren't worried about stopping, and it still charges really well, or don't need that huge range, there's some bargains to be had. I mean, I'm not presenting it's a little bit of money, but it's interesting how those prices will all come. And also, while I'm talking prices, I keep checking it every day. I can still buy a Tesla and have one delivered in November. So something weird is happening with electric vehicles at the minute. All of these people who are told to wait 18 months for their new car are getting calls from dealers being like, I've had a cancellation. You can have one next week. Something that's a topic for another day. But
well,
some
the
weird
economy's tanking. Everyone's backing out.
people are canceling.
Alyssa's sister got her ID4 just by walking into the Volkswagen dealer. The dude who was in there right before her canceled. They said, "Do you want this one?" He said,
Right.
"Great,
Yes.
yeah, I'll take it."
Right.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, I mean, interest rates are a little higher, and it's still increasing. So people are being, more conservative with their purchasing and canceling orders, and so demand is supply is catching up with demand to some extent, at least. Yeah. So we need to move on real quick. A couple stories we can't talk about real in depth, but I just want to mention real quick. Honda EN2 concept previewed in China. Check that out on Inside EVs. It shows the EV design direction we're not getting in this car in the US, and it's this is the concept form of it anyway. I think it's great, really great design language. The back's a bit funky, but yeah, we all have opinions. And also the Genesis is going to introduce the electrified GV70 to North America, and we'll hear about more of that. I think it's going to be shown at the LA Auto Show.
No,
So
they
we'll,
already did that. We already filmed videos with it.
GV70.
Yeah, we've already filmed videos with that car.
Okay, I just saw it on the. It's been a while since I've seen it. I guess.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's
That's
that thing
out.
looks so funky to me in the back. I don't
You
know.
don't like it? I think it looks awesome. Not on those wheels, but there are certain specs that you can make it look great.
It's just that like the back 3/4 part is like, but then I was looking at it, it threw me off a bit. And so I was looking at it from different angles. From different angles, it looks okay. But then I don't know, it just bugs me there. But
If anyone
anyway.
from Genesis watches this podcast, you do know, right, that electrified is the word that all the other car makers use for disguising some sort of shabby, soft 48-volt hybrid to try and persuade buyers in the dealership that, hey, this is the electrified version. If
Right.
you want to be green, stop using that
So
word.
stupid.
Well, they have a
Please
gas
call it
version
electric.
of,
Just call it the electric GV60, 70.
oh yeah,
I mean,
GV70 electric. Yeah, that would work.
The electric GV. Electrified is such a cop-out word that all of your competitors are using to I'll say that, or to, use smoke and mirrors to persuade people, oh no, we've got one of these in stock and it's got a battery. Please stop using that word.
Yeah, but Genesis uses it correctly.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is electrified.
Yes.
All right. So also want to mention that Turkey's national car maker, TOG, TOGG, they just started production of the 2023 C SUV EV. So that's you can find they were actually styled by Pininfarina, the SUV, and they have a sedan coming as well. That's a brand new automaker in Turkey, and it's going to be I don't know if they're going to even export. We'll have to see how that goes. They look, pretty decent and great to have. It'll probably be a lower cost thing. I think they're a little price sensitive in Turkey.
After the first year, I believe, they'll sell them to the government. It's very political. They've got elections next year, and now they're launching a national car company. They will be sold, they say, outside of the country after the first year.
Okay.
And but also a lot of auto parts are made in Turkey, by the way. So if you think,
yes,
like so the Turkish are doing their own car company, and like I say, elections coming up, it's very political, but they've got a big car industry there, by the way, just making bits for other people. So they know what they're doing.
Yeah. President Tayyip Erdogan was at the ceremony that they had there. But I just want to move on and get to what we've been driving this week, because Kyle, you drove the BMW i7 for the first time. And we also have a first drive write-up on Inside EVs written by Victoria Scott for us. So if you want to read the print article of that, is great. But Kyle, we want to hear about your driving with the BMW. I know you're really super excited about this car. Like, you're super excited about a lot of cars, but you're especially super excited about this car.
Yeah, this definitely just raises the bar of the car industry to the next level. In my opinion, thing is just insane. I think actually looks pretty good if you don't spec the M Sport. Just having that big black all over the front, okay. I think the spec that I chose was like ultimate luxury, classy spec, wool interior. Again, I think textiles increase the perceived quality of a car, in my opinion, more than leather. And we're really low on time, but this is not meant to be a performance car. It's not an outright, plaid in terms of a straight line. It costs from 118,000. The one I drove was 150. I was just under 150, which is the same price as a Model S Plaid, plus or minus, and smokes a Model S in terms of comfort and luxury and everything like that. Smokes an EQS, smokes a Lucid Air, smokes Taycan in terms of luxury. Taycan, again, more performance oriented. Model S, straight line beast. I love my Plaid. That's the ultimate American muscle car. This is what an executive sedan should be, and it shows how wrong Mercedes was with EQS. I can't fit in the back seat of the EQS. In this thing, I can fit straight up, sitting straight up, and the whole seat turns into an aircraft recliner. There's a drop down movie screen that comes, the shades come up, one of the best sound systems, really awesome experience in the back. Driving it is the quietest thing you can imagine. It was the quietest car, not by a little bit, but by a lot, that I've ever been in. And again, we have our e-tron. I've driven EQS, iX even. This has better noise performance than iX. It's almost eerily quiet. Like I almost got the feeling like I was going to get sick. It was so quiet. It was insane. You just like drive past a truck going full throttle up a steep grade, and the only way you know it's there is if you just look at it. Like, you cannot hear the diesel engine just running. It was crazy.
Wow.
In terms of driving performance in the canyon, set up really nicely balanced. Of course, it does the BMW thing. The F chassis BMWs of the last 10 years got pretty soft and rubbery and squishy, in my opinion. This just takes it up to another level. It is a comfortable car. This is not an M car by any means, but for what it is, it can hustle down a back road, doesn't complain. Huge grip. I was pulling over 1G of lateral grip around corners. Insane. 1.2 G under braking, just really, nice tire spec. We can expect big range, probably over 300 miles of range. And, because iX again went 40 miles farther than EPA, I expect sort of similar here, but we'll have to see when we run it through the tests. And I think that the only letdown about this car is the charging. It's a 400 volt system architecture, which for a German top level, this is the 7. This is as high as it typically goes. Why isn't it an 800 volt thing? A 7 Series has always been about pushing the limits. It was the first vehicle with eDrive, which really sucked back then, but it set the stage for infotainment systems for the entire industry for the next 20 years. I mean, this has always been a technical marvel. This car, from a battery pack and drivetrain, isn't, sadly. So the only perceived downside to that, to the driver, is a 200 kilowatt max charging rate. And to me, okay, not the end of the world, but it's just like they were so close. The rest of the car is so good. Just make it charge like a monster. This thing should have been doing 300 plus kilowatts, in my opinion. Other than that, amazing car. Left me with an impression unlike any other vehicle, just of, okay, this is the next generation of luxury vehicles, starting with the i7. It was crazy. I literally got out of a brand new Rolls Royce into this car, and I was like, this thing rocks. That's a big improvement.
Wow. What I thought was interesting was the software from a big OEM appears to be where it should be, as in, you set your destination to a fast charger, it's going to precondition. You've got Apple CarPlay plugged in, so you're not going through the car's infotainment. You can still toggle battery preconditioning on or off and stuff like that. Our viewers probably get it, but the wider world will be like, what are you talking about? But that's an indicator, right? To me, that's an indicator that the engineers get it, right? They get electrical propulsion rather than making it some sort of, well, we better make an EV version. I was really impressed.
Tom, any comments real quick before we move on to the next?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Martin was saying. I think last week on the show, I mentioned that, we criticized BMW for a while because they seemed like they were leaders. And in 2009, 2010, they started BMW I. They were, they had all these chassis of carbon fiber that they were going to make all these cars. They were not stopping at the i3. They were going to have an i4, an i5, all this stuff. And then they pulled back and said, we're going to wait a generation. We're going to make plug-in hybrids for the next 4 or 5 years. Then we're going to go all in with EVs. And they started with iX, i4, now i7. And what I think we're seeing is that they didn't just push everything to the shelf for those 5 years. Their engineers were working on this next generation of vehicles, even though they weren't putting out fully electric vehicles. Because don't forget, we went from 2014 to 2021 or 22. When did the iX come out? Was it 22?
I think 22 model year.
Yeah. So, they went 8 years without putting out a new electric vehicle, but they were working on it. They didn't just shelve it and say, okay, we'll pick this stuff up in 2020. And now we're seeing the fruits of that labor with i4, iX, now i7. They're all great electric vehicles, in my opinion. And I'm not surprised at all that Kyle's super impressed with this. I saw it in person at the unveiling in New York. I didn't drive it. Looked great to me. Hey, it seems like BMW is on the right track. They're not, the news of their demise is, was not exactly correct. Everyone was talking in like 2018, 2019, how BMW just, lost it and they're not going to be able to recover. I think they've joined this e-revolution and they're showing they know what they're doing with electric cars.
It's just amazing. I was thinking how Mercedes is really, it's really attacking the whole electrification problem. It's really pushing on all the, and I didn't see BMW like really surpassing them, but man, Kyle's making the case here that this is like better than what the EQS.
If you park this next to an EQS, how could you drive away in an EQS? Honestly,
right. I mean, styling wise, appearance for sure. And plus, you said the packaging inside is better, right?
This is slightly more expensive, but by the time you spec up an EQS and you spec up an i7, you're not far apart. But you get so much more with this car. You get so much more usable with this car in terms of interior space. And while some people may argue the i7 is still really ugly, it's nowhere near as ugly as an EQS. Look, EQS is awesome. You get 10 degrees of rear steer. This is only 3.5. There are benefits. I love MBUX personally. Mercedes infotainment trumps BMW infotainment in my eyes. And I like the way you interact with everything in Mercedes, but there's no way you would ever see me with these two side by side choosing an EQS over an i7.
It's a bit of a different philosophy here inside. Do you have much in the way of like mood lighting? Like the Mercedes EQS is like a spaceship inside there. Is it more traditional classy in this one?
There's still lighting everywhere. It's a modern German car. They probably have 50 meetings about where to put lights in these things. But it's nowhere near as crazy as EQS is. But still, I didn't drive this at night, but we know it's going to have, the one actually thing that we really should talk about that I didn't is the driver assistance system in the i7. Uses LiDAR, radar, and camera. I didn't drive it for a super long period of time. I drove the iX almost 4,000 miles when I had it on a big road trip. It is rock solid, dead straight, and the i7 has this augmented reality view, which you can see in the screen here, and it just projects everything that the car is responding to on your instrument cluster in front of you, and it just gives you this extra sense of confidence that the car's telling you that it sees what you're hoping it sees, and it's going where you're hoping it's going. And I only did, again, a short highway drive, maybe 45 minutes in this thing, but it was just awesome. Yeah, but no one, that's the thing. Mark just mentioned, the comments died as soon as we brought up i7. This is not a mass market vehicle. And so the people don't really care about this segment of car. Sure. And the people buying it is much smaller than the segment of Ioniq 5, ID4, EV6, Nissan Ariya that we typically cover. But this is still an important segment, and it's insane.
It bodes well for the future of BMW electric product that is more, affordable and attainable for the rest of us. But speaking of BMW, you also drove the i4 rear-wheel drive, the eDrive 40 this week, and tell us a little bit really quickly about what you think about that.
Yeah, well, I drove the i4 M50 here in Colorado. We did some testing with it and really liked it. The i4 is a great car. And ever since Tom drove it in Germany on the first drive, I was like, oh, maybe this, because that was back when we're like, BMW is going to fail. All their cars suck. Right. What's going on here?
On paper, it didn't match the Model 3 really.
Right. And then Tom drove it and he's like, no, like you need to go have a go in this thing because it's really good. And 100% he was right. The car is really good. We actually did a comparison of i4 against Model 3 from a performance driving standpoint. Model 3 is still better. in my opinion, more fun, more lively.
So
But
good.
and that kind of bothered me because this had an M badge on it, and I don't know. So the i4 M50 I was into, but I didn't fall in love with it. And then I drove the eDrive 40, which I've been really wanting to do range testing on the rear wheel drive, because this should be the range spec. So I'm going to try and link back up with this car at some point and do some testing with it. But this thing is $10,000, I think, plus or minus less than the all-wheel drive. Still has 300 and something horsepower, 330 horsepower, I think. And it feels fast, snappy. I actually prefer the way it handles to the M50. It's less planted. It's more playful. It's more old school BMW. I feel like I just want to go DSC off, hang the tail out everywhere. It has this rowdy character to it, which I really enjoyed. And in my opinion, this is more true to what BMW is in my heart than what the M50 is. So I would say if you don't need all-wheel drive, save the money, get the extra range, and go for the rear-wheel drive if possible.
Awesome. You also had the Hummer EV this week, and you've been doing some really great videos with that. Man, it's a big, I wish we had more time to talk about it. So, but you did the 70-mile-an-hour range test, which Tom has already done. So can you talk about that real quick? And maybe, I don't know, did you do any charging sessions with it too? Because the Hummer, Tom has struggled trying to get a good charging session out of the Hummer EV.
Yep, been doing a lot of charging, did the range tests. And so, yeah, first off on the range, I forget exactly what we came in with, but it was 1.4 miles per kilowatt hour at 70 miles an hour, which is not so good. Didn't come in as high as Tom did. I think, Tom, you got 346, was it?
343.
343, and yeah. I think we were in the teens, like 318, something like that. 318.3 is how far we went. I pulled 213 kilowatt hours out of a claimed 212 kilowatt hour usable battery pack. And yeah, just went far. Great Super Cruise. Very loud noise performance. It's not a highway cruiser. It's comfortable because it's heavy. It flattens everything, but it's not, wouldn't say it's the best road tripping option out there. Charges really fast. I haven't seen it as peak as high as Tom did. When Tom plugged in at, I think it was 25 or 30%, it pulls pack voltage up by dumping all the current in. And you saw, I think 365 kilowatt peak, Tom, something like that.
Yeah, it was lower. The state of charge was lower when I pulled it in. When it pulled that, it was under 10%.
I was just looking at the screenshot that you had posted. It definitely was a little bit deeper in than that.
Okay, then you remember better than I do.
Well, it's just because
I did so many recordings. I did like 7 different recordings.
Yeah, and I have to say I haven't had the troubles you've had, Tom. I've had a couple derating due to temperature where it comes down to 270 kilowatts from 350 or 340. Yeah. But I have a really good log, and I'll post the video at some point. Cool. But yeah. I also think it helps that it's really cold ambient temperature outside right now. I'm using the new EA charger, so brand new hardware that can definitely output the power, liquid cooled cables, and the truck has been pretty good temperature wise. What I actually did was just to walk you through kind of how it charges, it holds over 300 kilowatts to, I want to say 40% plus or minus. And then it comes down to the high 200s. And at 60% state of charge, it's still doing 250 kilowatts or more. And so, yeah, I have a pretty good log. So we'll at least look at that next episode when I put it together.
I have 7 different sessions recorded, and I never saw anything like what you're seeing. And I did it on 2 different vehicles, on like 4 different charging stations, even the new EA hardware. I drove down to Pennsylvania to a site that installed the new, the new EA, and I had the same problem. So, I'm a little baffled by it, but GM has been great, and they're working with me on it. And I'm actually going to talk to one of their engineers. I sent them all the data, and they're going to tell me what was going wrong. I'm sure it's some kind of thermal issue, why it just kept derating. And maybe the fact that since it's cooler where you are, that could have been that could be helping the vehicle not, just shut off.
Right. Yeah. I haven't experienced the shut off situation at all. I've seen it go down to 40 or 50 kilowatts. There seems to be this dip, and your logs show it as well, around 80% where it comes down. That's as designed. So this is doing the same thing. And then by the time you hit like 92%, it rockets its way back up. It makes no sense. But there's got to be this pressure point in the battery pack. There's certain like chemical state of charges with different chemistry where it's actually harder on the battery pack. Like I know, for example, electric Volvo and Polestar products, they hate 70%. So don't ever set your daily charging limit to 70% on a Volvo or Polestar. You want to go 60 or 80. But I was just talking to one of their battery engineers about that. Perhaps this has a similar thing around there where there's just a chemical stress level, and there's more degradation at that point of state of charge. But up top, charges pretty well. Still took 2 hours and 47 minutes to go 0 to full for me on my full thing. But again, that wasn't the perfect session. I've done now 4 sessions with it, starting at different state of charge levels, and I'll eventually have the theoretical peak of what this thing can do. But in 10 minutes, under a perfect scenario, I added 60 kilowatt hours in 10 minutes. I was like 59 kilowatt hours in 10 minutes, something like that. Just insane. I mean, that's like full charging a Model 3 Standard Plus in 10 minutes. Crazy.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. And to be clear, the dips that I had wasn't at 80%. It would never charge for more, and this is on both vehicles. Every time I plugged it in, it would never charge for more than 10 minutes without dropping down to 3 kilowatt charging. I mean, that's like basically it's not charging anymore. That's just like powering the thermal management system. Yeah. And it would just hold that unless I unplugged it and then plugged it back in.
Yeah. So I looked at all the logs, watched the video, saw everything before I did it. But this truck just hasn't experienced any of that behavior on my side. It has not charged easily. It's definitely not one that I can just plug in and just say, oh, there you go. Yeah. But it definitely doesn't seem to be giving me as much troubles as yours. And I think it has to do with ambient temperature. Yeah,
I think so. Well, I'll be talking to the GM engineers in about a week before I really put out a video and explain what was going on. But it'll be good that I'll have your information earlier too to compare, and when I talk to them.
Yeah, and I'm happy to join too to share my experience, or at least maybe help figure out what's going on. That'd be an interesting call. But I just on the Hummer. I love the Hummer. This is like the best thing on the planet. It's so it's a car I want to hate on principle. Like, you have to be an idiot to drive and buy one of these, but I am an idiot. So I love it. And just been crab walking everywhere, like, blocking 2 lanes of traffic. It's just, it's the best.
So while we've been talking about the range test, I've been playing, Kyle's got this other video on another channel, Out of Spec Overlanding, where he's taken the Hummer EV to the Out of Spec Hill Climb Challenge. And just real quickly, it looks like it's doing the thing. You had to, they couldn't get the front mechanical locker to work on it, but it still did it, no problem with the virtual rear locker. But you did show that the virtual rear locking doesn't necessarily lock all the time, right?
Right. It's the same thing we've been pointing out with Rivian and their 4-motor systems, this with their virtual locker. There's no way to virtually lock diffs instantly to work all the time. You would think it's possible with software, but with such varying terrain and pressures, you can't just like juice a ton of pressure onto a tire because then it would spin. So I'm a fan of mechanical lockers and EVs that are off-roading. I don't really like these 4-motor, 3-motor systems for off-road, in my opinion, unless they have some sort of soft locker or real mechanical locker on it. Yeah,
we need to see how that. And here you have it actually too. But just mentioned you have an extract mode, so that's like the maximum that you can lift it up, and it can only go like 12 miles an hour or something in extract mode.
12 miles an hour, and really limits the acceleration. I think because the half shafts are maxed.
Right.
Hey, Dom, sorry to cut in, but I really got to run.
So, yeah, okay. Me too.
Yeah, me 3. So let's end that. Let me just close that. And so, Tom, you were in Italy this week, and you got to see the new Porsche.
But I can't talk about it because I have to run.
Okay, see you, Tom.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Take that, Tom. See you later.
Right. We'll do the outro. So I'll just say that Tom was in Italy.
We should try and record something with Tom in the week because he's been traveling and it's really interesting.
Yes. Oh yeah. He has a bunch of stuff he couldn't talk about that whole thing anyway. So we'll hit him next week for sure. Actually, he won't be here with us next week, but
not next
very
week.
soon. But that brings us to the end of this show, and thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them on the Inside EV's forum podcast thread or on our YouTube or Twitch comment sections. If you like the show, please give us a thumbs up if you're watching us on YouTube. Don't forget you can follow our panelists on Twitter. Follow Tom Mologney at Tomolog, that's just 2 M's. Martin Lee is at EV News Daily. Kyle Connor is at It's Kyle Connor. And I'm at Dominic_Y. Click subscribe and tap that bell icon for notifications. And we'll see you all again next week. Ciao.